The jungle had no name on any map, only the one the locals whispered. Calavan, the Black Forest, because the canopy swallowed light like a jealous god. It was late monsoon season, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves. Arjun and Meera had come here for different reasons, but the jungle didn't care about reasons. Arjun was 29, a wildlife photographer from Mumbai who had grown tired of shooting tigers in national parks where tourists fed them biscuits. He wanted the raw, the unfiltered, the kind of shot that made editors choke on their coffee. He carried a Leica that cost more than most people's annual salary and a machete he barely knew how to swing. His beard was patchy, his eyes restless. He told himself he was here for the work, but really, he was running from a divorce paper that still sat unsigned on his desk back home. Meera was 31, a botanist from Delhi University, on sabbatical to catalog rare orchids before the loggers got to them. She wore khaki shorts, a faded kurti, and boots that had walked through 3 continents. Her hair was tied in a practical knot, her notebook filled with sketches and Latin names. She had come alone because her fiancé had called the trip a midlife crisis with mosquitoes. She hadn't argued. She just left. They met on the 3rd day, at the base of a strangler fig whose roots looked like the fingers of a drowning giant. Arjun was crouched, adjusting his lens, when he heard footsteps. Light, deliberate, not an animal. He stood, machete half raised, and saw her, sweat-streaked, a smear of mud on her cheek, holding a plant press like a shield. "You're not a poacher," she said. It wasn't a question. "You're not a ghost," he replied. "Though you move like one." She smiled, small and sharp. "Meera, botanist. You, Arjun, photographer. Lost." "I'm not lost," she said. "I know exactly where I am. You're the one holding the machete like it's a selfie stick." He laughed, surprised at the sound. It had been a while. They decided to walk together for a while. Safety in numbers, they told each other. The truth was simpler. Neither wanted to be alone with their thoughts. The jungle was louder than any city. Cicadas screamed. Monkeys argued in the canopy. Somewhere, a peacock called like a broken trumpet. They followed a deer path that narrowed and widened without logic. Meera pointed out things Arjun would have missed. The way orchids grew on decaying logs, the faint trail of a civet's musk, the difference between a cobra's hood and a rat snake's bluff. "You see the world in frames," she said, watching him photograph a butterfly with wings like stained glass. "I see it in systems." "And which one's better?" he asked. "Neither. Both. Depends on what you're trying to survive." Night came fast. They made camp by a stream that ran brown and quick. Arjun built a fire with damp wood and too much cursing. Meera boiled water in a tin cup, added wild lemongrass she'd found. They ate chickpeas from a packet and shared a bar of dark chocolate that had melted and re-hardened into strange shapes. "You're married?" she asked, noticing the faint tan line on his ring finger. "Was." She kept the dog. "I kept the guilt." Meera nodded. "I was engaged." He kept the apartment. "I kept the plants." They didn't say more. The fire crackled. Somewhere, something screamed and was silent. The next morning, the rain came. Not the gentle Mumbai drizzle, but a assault, sheets of water that turned the path to mud. Their map dissolved in Arjun's pocket. The stream became a river. They lost the trail. "We need high ground," Meera said. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook as she packed her notebook in a plastic bag. They climbed. The slope was slick with moss and leaf litter. Arjun slipped, caught himself on a root that tore his palm. Blood mixed with rain. Meera tied her scarf around the wound without asking. "You're good at this," he said. "Fieldwork. You learn to improvise." They found a cave halfway up the hill. Shallow, but dry. Inside, the air smelled of bad guano and old smoke. Someone had been here before. Charred wood, a rusted tin can. They huddled at the entrance, watching the storm rage. Arjun tried his satellite phone. No signal. Meera checked her GPS. "Dead. We're off the grid," she said. Completely. Completely. The word hung between them like a third person. Days blurred. They rationed food. Meera found edible ferns and a jackfruit too high to reach until Arjun climbed and nearly fell. They argued about directions. Arjun wanted to follow the ridge line. Meera insisted on the watershed. In the end, they compromised and got more lost. One afternoon, they stumbled on a clearing. In the center stood a banyan tree older than any city they knew. Its aerial roots formed curtains. Beneath it, the ground was carpeted with white flowers that opened only at dusk. Meera knelt. Reverent. Ghost orchids. Dendrophylax lindeni. They shouldn't be here. Wrong altitude. Wrong continent. Arjun photographed her instead of the flowers. The way the light caught the sweat on her collarbone. The way her fingers trembled as she touched a petal. You're wasting film, she said. Digital. And no, I'm not. That night, they didn't bother with separate sleeping bags. The cave was cold. Their bodies found each other in the dark, not with passion but with the clumsy necessity of warmth. His hand on her waist. Her head on his shoulder. They didn't kiss. Not yet. The next day, they found the poachers. 3 men, local but armed. Old rifles, machetes, a net stained with blood. They were skinning a deer, the carcass still steaming. Arjun and Meera watched from the ferns, hearts hammering. We should go around, Meera whispered. But one of the poachers looked up. Saw them. Shouted. They ran. The jungle became a blur of green and brown. Branches whipped their faces. Arjun's camera bounced against his chest. Meera's notebook fell somewhere, pages scattering like white birds. Behind them, shouts in a dialect they didn't know. They slid down a ravine, landed in a stream. The water was cold, up to their knees. Arjun grabbed Meera's hand. They waded upstream, against the current, until their legs burned. The poachers didn't follow. Maybe they decided 2 muddy strangers weren't worth the trouble. Or maybe they knew the jungle would finish the job. They collapsed on a sandbar as the sun set. Meera's ankle was swollen. Arjun's hand throbbed. They were out of food. We're going to die here, Arjun said. It wasn't dramatic. Just a fact. Meera laughed. A short, cracked sound. Not today. She fashioned a splint from a branch in her scarf. He found a mango tree, shook down fruit that was half ripe, half rotten. They ate the good parts, spat out the rest. That night, under a sky bloated with stars, they talked. Really talked. Arjun told her about the divorce. How his wife had said he loved the idea of people more than people themselves. How he'd missed their anniversary for a shoot in Ladakh. How the dog had looked at him with accusation when he left. Meera told him about her fiancé. How he'd proposed with a ring that cost more than her grant money. How he'd called her work cute. How she'd realized she didn't want to be someone's interesting story at dinner parties. I thought I was running to something, she said. Turns out I was running from. Same, Arjun said. They were quiet for a long time. Then Meera said, when we get out, if we get out, I'm not going back to that life. Me neither. She turned to him. In the starlight, her eyes were very dark. What do we go back to, then? He didn't have an answer. So he kissed her instead. It wasn't romantic. Their mouths tasted of mango and desperation. But it was honest. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. Okay, she said. That's a start. They moved at dawn. Meera's ankle held with the splint. Arjun carried both packs. They followed the stream, knowing it had to lead somewhere. The jungle changed. Thicker, older. Trees with buttress roots like cathedral walls. Vines that hummed with bees. On the 7th day, they heard it. The distant thump of helicopter blades. They stumbled into a clearing just as the chopper crested the ridge. A rescue team. Forest guards, a doctor, a journalist with a camera. They'd been reported missing when Meera's university raised the alarm. The guards wanted statements. The doctor wanted to check vitals. The journalist wanted photos. Arjun and Meera held hands as they were airlifted out. Neither looked back at the jungle. In the hospital in Bhopal, they were separated. Different wards, different tests. Arjun had an infection in his hand. Meera had dehydration and a hairline fracture. They texted when they could. You okay? Alive. You. Thinking about ghost orchids. Thinking about you. When they were discharged, Meera's department had offered her a new project, studying the impact of climate change on Himalayan flora. Arjun's editor offered him a spread. Lost in Kalavan, a photographer's nightmare. They met for coffee in Delhi. She wore a sundress. He wore a clean shirt. They looked like strangers. So, he said, what now? Now, she said, we figure out how to live in the world again. They didn't move in together right away. That would have been too easy. Instead, they took small steps. Arjun sold his Mumbai flat, bought a smaller place in Pune with a balcony big enough for plants. Meera moved her orchids there, one by one. He learned the Latin names. She learned to use his camera. They went back to Calavan 6 months later. Not as lost souls, but as scientists. Meera had a grant. Arjun had a contract. They hired guides, stayed on marked trails. The poachers had been arrested. Someone had found Meera's scattered notebook pages, used them to track the camp. In the clearing with the ghost orchids, they set up a small research station. Solar panels, a rain collector, a tent with 2 sleeping bags zipped together. One night, under the same bloated sky, Arjun said, "I used to think the jungle ate people. Turns out it just rearranges them." Meera traced the scar on his palm, the one from the root, now a thin white line. "We're not the same people who went in." "No," he said. "We're better." They got married a year later, in a small ceremony on the balcony. Meera wore a sari the color of moss. Arjun wore a kurta with tiny embroidered orchids. The dog from his old life came. His ex-wife sent him with a note. "He missed you." So did I, a little. Their daughter was born 2 years after that. They named her Kala, after the forest that had taken everything and given it back different. Sometimes, when the city noise got too loud, they drove to the edge of the jungle. Not to lose themselves, but to remember. The jungle didn't care about their story. It had seen a million before and would see a million after. But for Arjun and Meera, it was the place where they stopped running and started becoming.